Welcome back, everybody. We have the amazing Natasha Daniels here talking about the 5 things people secretly do because of their social anxiety. The reason I wanted Natasha on to talk about this is she has a new memoir coming out. She's the person to talk about the secrets behind having social anxiety. She talks all about it in her amazing new memoir that's coming out. I'll let her share more about that as it comes up. But welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Can you tell me the name of the book that you have coming out?
It is Out of My Shell,
Yes.
Overcoming Social Anxiety from Childhood to Adulthood.
And I've read it and I loved it. It was so good. And I wanted you to come on today because I think people think of social anxiety as just like someone in the corner, like shaking and shivering and can't talk, and that's how it looks. But you're here today to talk about sort of the secret life of having social anxiety and what you may secretly experience.
Yeah, I think people really don't understand what social anxiety looks like. And a lot of times people will say, like, oh, I don't, like, we all have a little bit of social anxiety. So they kind of discount the struggle, or they'll say, you don't have social anxiety. I'm getting that actually a lot, or I did get that a lot when I started, when I was starting to write the memoir. But I even had relatives who were like, well, you don't really have social anxiety, do you? And I think we keep it on, like a lot of mental health issues, you're really good at masking.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it doesn't match our idea of what that looks like. As someone
Yeah.
who's stuttering and can't get their words out, that's one presentation. But you're here to tell us a little bit about some other presentations. So, do you want to start by telling us the first secret thing that people do because of social anxiety?
Yes. And I want to preface it with a lot of people do these things, but it's the level that we do them that becomes dysfunctional. So the first one, and I was trying to think of like some broad categories, and the first one is over checking, not in an OCD way, unless you have OCD, but I check a lot. So, and a lot of this stuff, I actually, even though I am an anxiety and OCD therapist, when I created an Instagram account just for social anxiety, it was more of like a confessional account, like I'm just going to post reels and confess. It wasn't like I'm going to wear my like therapy hat. And it was actually really therapeutic because I'm like, saying all these things. And I was shocked that so many people are like, me too. I do that. I do that. And I was like, it's so much validation. So I wanted to say that before I go into what we check because it's weird. Checking smells. That's a big one. Did I put deodorant on? Do I smell? Compulsively checking, like, do I smell? Does my face look red? I went through a period of time where I was worried about blushing, which is a super common social anxiety thing. So, and it was only in my therapy sessions. It was so weird. And it was only if I disclosed anything about myself. There was like a very particular like rule. And that was my style, was to like teach through like a story. That's how my style is. And so the minute I would start to try to say a story, I would feel the warmth on my face and I would excuse myself and go to the bathroom and I would check, like, how red do I look? I know I feel red, but how red do I really look? So that checking of your face. This is another really, really embarrassing one that I continuously do and I can't stop. And I thought I was the only one, but I did post this on a reel and a lot of people said they do it too. And then I actually did have a friend who reached out and goes, "That's so weird. Like, why do you check that?" And that is when I leave a bathroom, I always check to make sure like my fly is up. Um, and there have been somebody actually commented on that reel and said, I check to see if there's toilet paper on my feet. So I
Yeah.
think it's this idea of like something embarrassing from this intimate situation, leaving the bathroom and making sure that you're not in a vulnerable state. And it only takes that one time where you check and you're like, oh my gosh, it is down
Yeah.
to like reinforce that behavior
Yeah.
all over again.
And just to be clear for people who are maybe newer to social anxiety or maybe just questioning, do I have it? From my understanding and my experience as a clinician, and you please weigh in, a lot of the times with social anxiety, there's like a fear of humiliation, a fear of embarrassment, a fear of people judging them. Is there any other fears that you're doing these checking behaviors to reduce or eliminate?
Yeah, and I'm thank you for saying that because I do feel like people think social anxiety is about, on a very surface level, a lack of social skills, or conversely, like being shy. And those can be components, but that's not what defines social anxiety. It is that fear of rejection, embarrassment, and not enoughness. And I think it's that fear of being found out.
Yeah.
Um, and it's different for each person with social anxiety, like what your core fear is. It's not universal. And so some of the things that I do for my social anxiety may not be what someone else does, um, depending on their core fear around it. I
Yeah.
think mine is the fear of rejection. And looking stupid, those are some of them. So smelling, and then being ostracized, or being vulnerable and embarrassed by having something exposed that wasn't not intentional, or even the fear of looking inadequate in a therapy session, right? So like my face is blushing, so there's obviously something wrong with me, and now they're going to find out that I have my own issues.
Yeah.
So there's all these stories that we tell ourselves.
For sure. I remember I used to do this a lot, was check to see if I had sweat marks, right? Like, especially as a young teen, like to have sweat water under your armpit was in my, I don't know why, but in my mind, that was like the most humiliating thing that could ever happen to you on the planet. So that was something I would constantly, like, secretly create scenarios that I could go and check that to see if that was going on.
That's a big one. That's still a big one for me. I will not wear, when I look at my wardrobe, I choose it based on whether it would disguise any kind of sweat. And I will even, this is what I mean by the acuity of it, right? Because I will even take the fabric and I will, as I'm getting ready, I will put water under the arms and see what it does to the fabric. And
Right.
I won't wear it like if I'm going to be interviewed or if I'm going to be in a public event. I will absolutely not wear that, to the point where you look at my wardrobe and it's mainly patterns. I'm wearing a pattern today, or it's black, or
Yeah.
there's I will never wear like just this blue shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, so already, and I don't, I'm sort of just jumping in just so people know, like, a lot of the things that you're telling me, I'm having actual images of exposures that I've done with clients where they purposely, like, would rub like pepper into their teeth to expose, or they'd purposely, like, put water under their shirt to show, like, to practice having that happen. So I'm just laughing at sort of the opportunities here. Okay, fantastic. So are there any other checking behaviors that you feel like we have to review or look at?
Those are the ones that I thought about that were
Hmm.
like big ones for me. But I do feel like everyone has different things that they check.
Yeah.
Um, and so just being aware of that, as
Right.
for someone who has social anxiety, is what things do I need to check all the time?
Right, and I feel like there's such an overlap here for people who have body image concerns as well, and how that also becomes a part of their social anxiety. Like, what if someone notices the weight that I've gained, or the shape of my body, or the size of my breasts, or the my receding hairline, like, so for men and women. So I think that um other insecurities or vulnerabilities can clash, and now you've got this double whammy of checking, trying to keep it secret so no one could see this, like, this vulnerability that you may or may not have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about the second thing that people secretly do when they have social anxiety.
Rehearsing is a big one. And so, and I was trying to think of general things that then get very specific. I think a lot of people with social anxiety do a lot of rehearsing in their mind, which
Mm.
is distracting. And so we're not present because we're so busy rehearsing. And I rehearse in so many ways. When I'm going through the drive-through, my kids can't talk to me like when we're getting even close to the street of where we're going to pull in, because I'm like, tell me your orders now, and we're like 20 minutes away, like. And then this actually happened yesterday. It happens all the time. We're driving, and my son's telling me all these things, and I want this sauce, and I want this, and then say deluxe because I want the deluxe, and then I'm practicing in my head, and I'm like, I'm not going to remember any of this, and so I pull up, and then as soon as she's like, "What do you want to order?" I look at him, I'm like, "What do you want?" Like, it's gone. Um, or if I'm by myself, like just really practicing in that drive through, especially, like, this is going to sound like a first world problem, but like if it's Starbucks or Dutch Bros, if you have a Dutch Bros, like their drinks are like double rainbow,
Yeah.
venti this, or, and
Yeah.
I think in general, ordering in general can be really hard for some people with social anxiety. Again, because you don't want to appear stupid.
Yeah.
Also worried about people behind you. So rehearsing is a big one. I'll rehearse sometimes before I call someone. I'll think, what exactly am I going to be saying to them? How do I want to phrase it? A lot of times, if I want to speak like in a meeting, and people are talking, like I can tell that like my body's preparing me to talk because like my heartbeat will start to race and it'll start to beat faster. And in my head, I'm like practicing what I'm going to say over and over again until they call me. So it's a lot of just anticipatory anxiety. And then I'm missing what's going on in the meeting because I'm so
Mhm.
focused on what I'm going to say. And then the worst part is when they move over and it's a different topic now. And I've lost that opportunity because I was so in my head. And this can happen in a social situation too, where you're in a group, and you have a story to tell or you want to interject in the story and you're kind of just waiting. I think one of the hard parts with some people with social anxiety, definitely one of my struggles, is like when to jump in a group setting.
Yes.
Don't want to dominate because a lot of people with social anxiety, I keep saying a lot of people because it's different for each person.
Yeah.
I'm just speaking about my own experience, but you don't want to come off as selfish. There's this like hyper fixation on not looking vain, narcissistic, or self absorbed. So, this over concern of, I don't want to look like I'm dominating this conversation. So, letting other people talk and letting them, have their conversation and then jumping in. And then it's like, well, when do I jump in where it's like smooth and it's like not this awkward? And I often wind up just being really awkward, even one on one, where I'll just try to transition to a different topic and it's clunky
Yeah.
because I didn't practice it enough.
Yeah, but I think this is an interesting topic, this idea of rehearsing, because I think there's a balance. Like some people secretly do this as in a compulsive manner, whereas some people also do this in an effective manner, right? Like some people who do have social anxiety and are still developing their social skills. I often will do some rehearsal with clients so to get them used to like having these sort of flowing conversations. But I do agree with you, it does make it a little clunky. I've heard lots of people say this is so hard on dates, right? You're really interested in the person, you want them to feel like you're interesting and you're interested in them, but as they're talking you're thinking about how you're responding, and then that person is thinking they're off, like do they like me, they're off with the fairy. So it's such a difficult experience because the person with social anxiety cares so much. They want to be in relation with these people. It's such a bummer that anxiety gets in the way.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing to highlight, that people with social anxiety want to be connected. They
Yeah,
want relationships. I do feel like sometimes people think, oh, they have social anxiety, so I won't bother them.
yeah,
And I've had that experience where people are like, we won't reach out to her because we don't want to make her socially anxious, or we won't invite her because we don't want to make her socially anxious. And that really just feeds the narrative of, I'm not included, I'm not enough, I'm separate.
yeah,
And I feel like this list they're not safety behaviors. So some of them might have some productive quality to them. I think they're just some things that we do,
yep,
and some things that do serve a purpose. I don't think I'll ever stop 100% rehearsing.
yep,
Um, when I'm in a drive through for sure, or when I'm in a group setting, it's just my brain is wired to do that. Like to think,
yep,
okay, you have a good story for this, or you have a point. I mean, and I think this is an individual choice. I, I'm working on focusing more on the moment one on one. Like I want to immerse myself, like you said, being on a date, that's not going to happen for me. But, being on a one on one relationship, like a friendship, I don't want to look distracted. And I really
yeah,
want to soak up this person. And I'm missing out on fully soaking up the experience because I'm so busy analyzing things. And we'll talk about some of the other things as that plays into that conversation of why your mind is not there and you're not present for that
yeah.
experience.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up because we're discussing 5 things that people do secretly, but what we're not suggesting is that you have to do like a radical elimination of these things. Again, I think that some rehearsal, like I sat down and I looked at the questions today and I did some rehearsal, and I did that because I don't want to look ridiculous, but that's effective, right?
Yeah.
That's effective behavior. You like taking a minute to breathe before going through a drive-through can be super effective. So I want listeners to really don't feel like a lot of judgment around this either.
Yeah.
That we're all doing the best we can, and everyone has to decide for themselves whether it's helping or hindering.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's talk about number 3, the third thing that people do secretly because they have social anxiety.
Rereading texts or email. I think that, and a lot of people do this, but we do this ferociously. I think looking for things. And so um, I reread every text I send as soon as I send it. And then I see typos, or I see like, oh, I didn't make that point. When Apple decided they were going to let you edit your text, it was like a beautiful thing
I
because
was
it's
just gonna say it was either
yeah,
beautiful or it just made it more complex.
I liked it because there was nothing worse than seeing like my comment with a typo or not conveying what I want, or it sounded wrong. Um, yeah, I actually, because, instead of putting a little asterisk and then like typing it, because it's that perception of now you think I don't know how to spell, or now you think that I'm stupid. Um, the other thing that the reviewing of text serves is making like reading into text. I remember one time, this was a long time ago, I was talking to somebody, I don't remember who, and they wrote like thank you with a period, and I was like, I think they're mad at me. And he's like, why? And I read it and I was like, because they wrote thank you period. And
Yep.
he's like, I don't think that's a big deal. And I'm like, who puts a period in a text? This is an example of like how you can read into things. And he goes, get out your phone. He goes, look, if you write thank you, like it automatically puts a period in there. I don't know if it's true, but it's that reading of the messaging behind, like the deeper messaging behind it, or oh, I'm obviously bothering them because it's been 5 minutes and they haven't replied yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't think that those are very helpful. Those aren't very helpful behaviors typically.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that often does come in, and we'll talk about this later on, is when you check your text, it opens the door for so much self-criticism of your own, right? Like I am notorious for spelling errors. Not because I don't know how to spell, it's just that I'm usually in such a rush that I just move on, right? And even some of my clients like will joke at me and be like, your texts or your messages are off the charts incorrect. And I'm like, You got it really quickly. Would you prefer it to take longer, or do you want it really quickly? Like I can't do both. But I think when we do go back to respond, if I went back to respond, I could very quickly start to tell a narrative to myself about my intellect, how people see me. I'm mind reading now. I'm comparing myself. I'm using very critical words. That's where I would be careful around that behavior, because it does open a door to that self-critic that you speak about in your book a lot, about talking to that critic and talking to the different stages of your life where that belief showed up in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does. It's just fuel. It's fuel for the
Mhm.
story that your inner critic is just looking for evidence to show you. I feel like that. And that's what I describe in the book is like, and I name it because I'm all about personifying it. But, that my Paro, I call it Para for paranoid, is is constantly searching for evidence to like fuel the narrative that I'm not enough, or that I am, that I repel people. Like there are stories that my social anxiety wants to reinforce, and it trains the brain to look for evidence to support that. And when you're reviewing text, that supports that. When you're we'll get to the next one when we get to that point, that the next one we're going to talk about, that supports that.
Go
And
ahead.
when we're the next one is over analyzing body language. And so I feel like the social anxiety brain is always searching for objective proof that you're not enough, or that people don't like you, or that you're being rejected. And it feels so real. And to the point where I didn't even really understand that I had social anxiety until I was in my 40s. And it was acute social anxiety. Now I look back and I'm like, wow, like I couldn't put out Christmas decorations without thinking the entire neighborhood was staring at me. So I would have to like get my husband to come out with me, or and the whole like 20 minutes, I'm like, hurry up, get it out. Because I feel like we're on stage. And even just walking to my mailbox, which is down the street, that felt like walking on a catwalk. Like I felt like my neighborhood's really quiet. There's nobody out, but, or even just walking yesterday. I mean, it doesn't always, just because you can identify social anxiety and you work on it. I mean, I remember going to the mailbox yesterday. I normally drive there because it's like on my way. And I'm like, am I walking funny? And all of a sudden I feel like I forgot how to walk. And I'm like, I'm focusing on my walk. And then I feel really awkward. And like the whole walk is awkward because I'm like, I don't know how to walk. And
Yeah.
that just is so much, you get so in your head. But I wanted to talk about the body language because this one is really big for a lot of people. When you're having a conversation with someone, it's like almost like your brain is trained to look at those cues of disinterest. Are they looking away? Are they looking at their watch? Do they check their phone? Do they look annoyed by what I said or disinterested? And unfortunately, I think we get really good at picking up subtle cues that other people miss. I know when my husband was alive, he was like the antithesis of someone with social anxiety. Like he thought it'd be funny if he said a joke and no one laughed. Like to him, that is hysterical. And to me, that's like my worst fear. And so we'd be together with like a stranger or whatever. And he if somebody was in a bad mood, like checking us out or whatever, and they were like rude, he like took it like that was a challenge for him. He's like, I'm going to make this person laugh. And for me, like, I'm like mad at them for being mad at me, for being so annoyed. And he'll say something really awkward and it won't land because the person's in a bad mood and he'll think that's hysterical. So sometimes I would see other people's body language, like if we were out,
Yeah.
and I'd be like, they don't like you, or like they're not finding you funny. And I felt like when you have social anxiety, I think you are actually really good at reading body language to the point where it harms you, because you do learn. I think I do actually pick up on subtle cues because I'm so clued in
Yeah.
that other people have the gift of being oblivious.
Yeah. I have to tell you the funniest story. Last week, I was invited on a very well-known podcast, and in my area of expertise, and they were interviewing me, and they yawned like 3 times during the episode. Like, and I'm not talking like a little yawn. I'm talking like, that yawn where they're trying their best to hold their face normal. They're like
Oh
like
my
these. And I was in that moment thinking, thank God I'm I'm not having a social anxiety fit right now, like, because that could have totally ruined the entire episode for me. Like, once upon a time, if that had have happened, I would have been 10 out of 10 anxious for the rest of the podcast. I probably wouldn't have been able to get my words out. Um, I was just so grateful that I was able to not take it personally in that moment. But when you have social anxiety, that's nearly impossible.
Yeah, that would have totally derailed me.
I was like,
That's
totally. I got off it and I was like telling my husband, I'm like, you will not believe, not once, not twice, 3 times.
that would have devastated me. Yeah, that's amazing. You were able to just kind of keep going on. That would have been so distracting.
Yeah, yeah. But I know I already knew because their scheduler had told me this was their 4th episode of the day. So I had in my mind, like, this person is exhausted. But
Yeah,
still, those are the kind of body language cues
yeah,
that can be so heartbreaking for people with social anxiety.
yeah. And a lot of times they aren't necessarily about you. They have a meeting, so they're looking at their watch, or there's an emergency and they're checking their phone. And sometimes it is about you. And really the goal isn't to convince yourself that people actually do like you. The goal is to convince yourself that you don't need other people to like you in order to be whole yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we go on to the last one, I'm going to just ask you a question that we didn't really prepare for. But with with symptoms we like obsessive compulsive disorder and other anxiety or obsessive compulsive related disorders, the fear is ego dystonic, meaning we have it, but it doesn't feel true to our values. For you and your experience having social anxiety and treating people with social anxiety, do you feel that the fear is in line with your beliefs, or can you see it to be not like it's just, you could say that's my anxiety? How is it that you truly do in those moments believe that you're not enough or you're not good enough, or is it not a belief, it's sort of more ego dystonic?
Love that question, because that I think is the number one struggle with social anxiety, is that you do believe
Yeah.
that it is true. And, in my book, I'm debating, and almost to the point where I thought, am I debating too much with myself? Because I'm doing therapy with my younger versions of myself. So I'm
Yeah.
talking to Miss 7 and Miss 14, Miss 21. And a lot of the early sessions until I think I hit my 30s, most of this conversation in the therapy sessions that I'm having with my younger self is about identifying it as social anxiety, and
Yeah.
my younger self arguing and saying, no, you don't understand. Like, I do repel people, or people just don't like me. And I think that's one of the hardest parts about social anxiety. And it's probably why it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I was like, oh my gosh, I have social anxiety, like not mild, but severe, was because I told myself that it was legitimate, that
Mm.
it wasn't that I'm having upsetting thoughts that made me think I'm not enough or people don't like me. The story was, you are not enough. Here's all this evidence. Here's all your history. You do repel people. And I'll point it out over and over again why you repel people and how you repel people. And there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I think that is the first step in recovery with social anxiety, is recognizing that it is social anxiety, and
Yeah.
that yes, you might be more attuned to body language and rejection. You're like a little like sponge of negativity. You can pick it up a mile away. And yes, some of it is real, but it's the spinning of the story and then the behaviors that we like perpetrate, like because of that, that perpetuate the social anxiety,
Yeah.
and keep it going.
Yeah. I think it's hard, and I'll speak as an outsider looking in, is some of the people I know with social anxiety, yourself included, I would never guess they have social anxiety because they're so lovable. They're so sweet and kind and um, just great human beings. They're so, and that could be because they're constantly checking and making sure they are good human beings. But like it's funny that, and I would say this to anybody with social anxiety, that you could for 1 second be thinking that you're not good enough. Whereas I'm over here like adoring on you and just so appreciate who you are and what you do for our community and all the things you do. And it's the great person you are, a great mom. So it's funny that there is that belief makes it feel so real for people with social anxiety, but people looking from the outside in would never agree.
Yeah. And I think that's common. I think that people looking out would not really identify that.
No.
Even when my siblings read my memoir, and my uncle, who I'm close to, like my brother and my sister were like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, wow, like that's a lot. We did
Yeah.
not, we wouldn't have guessed. And these are people who know me in and out, that I think were surprised. And I think a lot of times masking is really a strong thing, like that you can fake it till you make it a lot of the times. And there's always a but. Yeah, I might be in the OCD community, or I might be in the anxiety community, but
Yeah.
there's a little side story that we say to ourselves about that,
Yeah.
um, that
Lot
sabotages it.
lots of thought errors, like,
Mhm.
discounting the positive and magnifying the worst and a lot of those errors. Yes. Yes. Okay, tell me the fifth thing that people secretly do when they have social anxiety.
They keep track of who initiates contact. So, you know, and like this just happens like automatically in my brain and a lot of people's social anxiety, where if you ask me, you know, here's this friend that you have. Who was the last person who contacted, like her or you? I would be able to tell you right away, which I think is probably abnormal because I
It
know, like,
makes
who
me
is going to
nervous.
I mean, only like not with everybody. I'm not like, oh,
Of
I
course.
reached out to Kimberly and she didn't reach out to me. This is my third time reaching out to her. And maybe some people are like that,
Yeah.
but I really have taken a lot of effort to like create friendships since my husband died. Like he was really my only friend, and that was enough for me, and it was a comfortable arrangement for my social anxiety. So when he died, I was like, I have to have a support system. I have to have friends. And so I worked really hard in the last 3.5 years to like develop friendships. And so they're all new friendships. I have like maybe like four, what I would call close friends,
Yeah.
people that I had maybe a loose association with before Jimmy died. And then they just showed up for me because they're nice people. And then I like clung to them like mold. I was like, please don't ever let go. I need a friend. But with those friendships, because they're newer, like 3.5 years new, I'm like very aware of like, when did I reach out? Am I bothering you? This is the third time that I reached out to make plans and you haven't reached back out to me. And I think that's a struggle with social anxiety, that we keep tabs.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful because people may not reach out for all sorts of reasons. And it doesn't really speak to the quality of the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's again that piece of where you were talking about body language as well, as you can make so much meaning out of that. They didn't respond to me, therefore fill in the blanks. They don't like me, or I said the wrong thing. I know a lot of people with social anxiety review past conversations of like, was I weird? Did I say something awkward? Did I, and so forth. So I think that is so common for but again, I want us to say it's so common for social anxiety, but also just shows how much they genuinely want to be in relationship with these people.
Yeah, I think that is the missing piece, is that there's this desperation to belong, and there's
Yeah.
this desperation to be included. Not that you'll always accept the invitation to be included, but you want the invitation so
Mm,
that you can decide.
yeah.
So, and I do feel like people with social anxiety, and this is a biased opinion, but I feel like they are some of the most kind-hearted
Yeah.
people because they care. They care enough to want that approval, to want that connection, to want to belong. Um, and so they're normally very aware of
Yeah.
how they're interacting, and are super thoughtful friends. I mean, I wish that I could reach out and just be friends with a whole bunch of people with social anxiety,
Yeah.
because we make great friends.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're attuned, right? They wanna be deeply attuned than having just this surface level, even though it's scary. So I completely agree. And I think I always remember Christopher Germer at a presentation that I went to of his, where he said, and I'm curious if you have, rebuttal or agreement to this, is he always said, social anxiety is not an anxiety disorder, it's a shame disorder. And that always deeply resonated with me, because as much as people experience anxiety, either in addition to it or underneath that anxiety is this very strong emotion of shame. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Hmm. I mean, I think shame is a component, but I really see it as an anxiety disorder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, because it's all the what ifs and the
Yeah.
over analyzing, and it really feels, I mean, I have anxiety in other areas and it feels very similar. I feel like shame
Yeah.
is a component, but it's also this desperation of, what if I don't belong? What
Yes.
if I'm not included? What if this always happens and I'm just always by myself? I think it's bigger than that, but I can see where shame could be a component of it.
Yeah. And I think it's true, because as he said that, I was like, oh, that really resonates with me as someone with an eating disorder and having social anxiety in that era of my life. It was all fueled by shame. So I think for each person, like you said, different emotional experiences might exacerbate your social anxiety. But yes, definitely. I mean, anxiety being at the crux of it. I think everyone I've ever talked to with social anxiety has panic as well, or has had panic attacks at some point in their lifetime. What would you say to somebody as we kind of close up? What would you say to the person with social anxiety?
There's a lot, but I think that the main message, and it can sound like a very trite, cheesy message, but it's so true. The more I actually start to focus on myself, and when you start to really appreciate yourself and even develop a counter story or even a
Mhm.
counter character in your brain of, here is my social anxiety and here is the voice in my head that's rooting for me. And start to defend yourself and start to love yourself and start to cheerlead yourself. And that can feel really artificial and inauthentic at first. But over time, that becomes part of your inner voice. And the more you focus inward, the less you care about the outward. And that's really been the most therapeutic thing for me is fueling myself, really focusing on myself and cheerleading myself and loving myself. So if someone's mean to me, my inner self is like, we don't deserve that. And like, how rude. And so pour your energy in yourself, even though that seems maybe counterintuitive. And I feel like the social anxiety um, gets better as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree so much. Again, I mean, if I were to add the sixth thing that people with social anxiety do secretly is they beat themselves up,
Yeah.
right? Like, so, I mean, we're not adding a sixth thing, but that's so much a part of this. So if you can start to be kinder and cheerlead yourself or be your inner best friend, we talk about that here a lot. That's going to be really huge. Um, Thank you for coming on and sharing this. It's very vulnerable what you're sharing even. How
It
how is
is.
how is
It's
that for you? Can you do it a little check-in and explain how that feels for you?
ironically, I mean, well, talking to you because you're so easy to talk to, and you don't really think about this being in out there in the world. Whenever I'm very good at like lying to myself, I'm like just sitting here just talking to you.
Just telling
Um,
Kimberly a little story.
yeah, I mean, I actually feel like I'm very comfortable talking about myself.
Yeah,
It is a comfortable place, and it's a good exposure to feel naked and to kind of like take the power away from social anxiety by like spilling all of its secrets.
yeah,
And so there's something like really therapeutic actually about it.
yeah. I'm so happy to hear that. Tell us about your book. Tell us where we can hear about you. Tell me all the things.
Yeah, so the memoir is called Out of My Shell, and I really wanted to write a book that would help people as well. I'm so into mental health memoirs. That's actually how I wound up writing it because I was like, I wanted to read a social anxiety memoir to like work on myself, and I couldn't find one that was just solely social anxiety that spoke to me. And so the book is about it goes back and forth from childhood to adulthood, and then in between there's therapy sessions with my younger selves. And really, the idea is that we have to kind of go back and heal our younger selves. Because that's the meat of social anxiety is all those younger experiences and perceptions, and then I do my own social hierarchy and I put myself in really awkward situations. And my hope is that people can read this and passively learn how to do these things for themselves or feel empowered to do that for themselves. So not only hopefully is it an interesting story and it's engaging to read, but they walk away feeling empowered to take some actions themselves.
Yeah.
So people can find the book wherever books are sold. It's released September 19th. They can go to socialanxietyreality.com, which is the website. And then I actually, on Instagram, I have my secret confessional account, which I guess is
Not
not
so
secret anymore.
secret.
I know. And that's Social Anxiety Reality as well, where I am just really saying it as it is.
Good. I think that's the piece, right? Is just let's actually talk about what it really is so that's the work.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for you coming on. Thank you.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear all the success of the book when it comes out.
We'll see.